And we are live. Yeah, it works. Welcome. Hello, everyone. How are we doing? It's been a while. Long week, at least for the for the French speakers. For the English, it was like business as usual. But long time no see for the French ones because no stream last week because Euroguesser, long weekend. I got sick. And actually, yes, I'm speaking as if we were Tuesday. No, we Wednesday because yesterday I didn't stream because there was not that much news because of the long weekend. I was waiting for stuff for August. Anyway, we're streaming tonight. Everything is fine. Pretend it's Tuesday. Welcome for the news review. Hey, Andros. How are we doing? We're going to stream today. We are doing the news review as usual. I'm gonna try to speed run a bit the stream today because I have like this week is insane. Like I'm just running around everywhere because of Euroguesser, because we're not doing the Euroguesser in the usual place. I have to take the train. Well, it's a long story. Not of interest for the English speaking audience, so I'll skip it. But yeah, long story short, I'll try to speed run a little bit this news review. On the menu, obviously, we have to talk about the Hungarian elections. Final week before the final days before the actual election. The election are on Sunday, on the 12th. Yeah, it's the 12th. Yeah, it's the 12th. Andros, question for you to start. When are we expecting the results? Like, is it on Sunday evening at 8, or do we have to wait 1 or 2 days for the count to be made? How does that work in Hungary? I would have made. I actually hesitated. No, I didn't. I would have made possibly a stream to follow specifically the Hungarian elections, but since I have a Euroguesser on Saturday night in the south of France, logistically it was not possible for me to do something on the Sunday. Exit poll at 8, results around 10 or 11. Okay, so a bit similar to France. Alright, so it's gonna be like it's the final week. Like pressure is at an all-time high. We had the vice president of the US in Hungary to do the. He stayed how long? Like 2 days, 3 days in Hungary. Basically to do a campaign event for Orban. We're going to read about JD Vance coming to the Vice President of the US coming to Hungary. We're going to read a couple of profiles about the potential, well, not the potential, the actual challenger to Orban, Peter Magyar. Extended northern half of the city is still on lockdown. Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess it must not be easy to move around in that case. Whenever there's a US high-ranking person there, I can guess that it must be a nightmare to move around. We're gonna read about that. We're gonna read a couple of profiles about Peter Magyar, because it's true that I don't think we have read profiles about him yet on stream. I don't think so. So that's a good thing that they just decided to publish a couple of profiles on him. So we're going to read about that. Then I think we're going to spend most of the time on the Hungarian elections, and that's at least my plan. And for the two other topics, I just picked one article per topic. One on the veto, because of course we are talking a lot about vetoes, about foreign affairs, and how to sort of fix the question of the veto on foreign affairs in EU decision making. So read an article about what are the issues and the possible ways to sort out that veto, replace it with something else, etc., for the case of foreign affairs. And to finish, discuss a bit an article about it's a classic, but we haven't talked about it in a while actually. So it's a good occasion, a good opportunity to come back a bit on that, on the permanent tension between industrial policy and competition policy. Like you've heard a lot, we've heard a lot. Von der Leyen and some countries, particularly France and Germany, talk about the notion of EU industrial champions, the idea of creating those great big European companies to compete with the US and Chinese companies. So that's something that we hear quite a lot. But so that's typically something that is more on the side of building a European industrial policy. But in the background, there's a tension with another policy, which is the competition policy, which on the contrary, tends to want to avoid the emergence of those kind of behemoth in English, behemoth of industrial champions that could just squat the competition. So we're going to read a bit about this tension between these two policies and who is winning on that front so far. And as usual, if there are other topics you want to discuss, you let me. I'm just checking my phone because I have to keep an eye. I'm keeping an eye on things. Okay. Just bear in mind, I may at some point like to run outside for a minute during the stream, so don't panic. It's not that because you finally broke me and I'm quitting streaming live to generate views. It's just that I have something on the side that I need to keep an eye on, so I just need to leave a minute and then I'll come back, promise. You will be able to count sloobies in the meantime. For the French speaking, I will let you explain the principle of the sloobies to the English ones. But yeah, that's the program for today. So I suggest that we dive right in. So we're going to start with Hungary, and as we just discussed, Orbán, so the current prime minister, is facing the most difficult re-election since he's been like for the past 16 years. Like he was elected, not first, but he's been re-elected in 2010, and since then he has been winning election after election. Maybe not easily, but without ever being really seriously challenged. This time it's different because for the first time, actually, we have the main challenger who is in the polls still for now, ahead of him, the main challenger, Peter Magyar, from the party TISO. And just tell me if that's still the case, but I mean, that's at least on the polls that I'm seeing for now, he's still like counted 10 points ahead to Fidesz. I know there's some polls that have come out today or yesterday saying that he could even secure like the 2/3 majority in the parliament, but that's kind of an outlier, I think, in terms of polls. So I'm not really counting it. For now, I'm focusing on the, let's say, those that have been like more consistent. That says that he's been doing 10 points ahead of Orbán. So wait and see. I mean, in any case, it's Hungary. I think until the very last moment, it will be very very close. And as Andros was saying, depending on how close it is, it may even take longer. So there's going to be a lot of tension, a lot of pressure on that. And of course, in the final week of campaign, that's where we get all the big guns. Orbán has got the vice president of the US, J.D. Vance, to come in Hungary to participate in one of his rally campaign to show his support to Viktor Orbán. And so J.D. Vance slammed Brussels, the Brussels bureaucrat, for meddling in Hungary before the election, at least according to J.D. Vance. So Viktor Orbán's rival in Sunday's election has accused the White House of interference. Some polls even predict 2/3 majority for TISO, but that's, yeah. I've seen those polls. I so far I've only seen one, so yeah, I'm taking it with a grain of salt. Again, at this stage, I think like until the very last moment. We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see. Even if it's true that actually, like the one thing that is interesting about that poll is that everyone is focusing on whether or not Peter Magyar can beat Orbán, and so Orbán would lose the premiership. But that's actually only the easy part, so to say, because the real barrier, the real threshold is not the 50% plus one, it's the 2/3 majority. Why? Because of the way Orbán throughout the years has changed the constitution, some fundamental laws that are called the cardinal laws, if I remember correctly. Andros, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the cardinal laws that he has made like that. So there's a lot of things that Orbán has done to kind of lock down the system, and that can only be changed through a 2/3 majority in the parliament. Meaning that if TISO, so the party of Peter Magyar, the opponent of Orban, wins the elections but doesn't have the 2/3 majority, cool, he'll be prime minister, he will have a majority in the parliament, but that won't be enough for him to undo a good chunk of the things that Orban has done, and notably some of the appointments that he has made and in key institutions that require the 2/3 majority. And so that's why like the real question is how close and can Tissot manage to get that 2/3 majority or not? And if he doesn't manage to get the 2/3 majority, he's gonna get kind of stuck, and there's a risk that he would end up in a kind of in the similar scenario to what Donald Tusk is having in Poland, where he has a majority, but his reforms are blocked because of other organs controlled by the former majority. So PiS in the case of Poland, and in the case of Hungary, potentially Orban. Fidesz. Can G-Event support really make a major difference? So far, it seems that it hasn't moved a lot the needle. Like from the first poll that have come out, we'll read in the article, but from the first poll that has come out since G-Event's appearance in the rally, it hasn't had a huge impact, which in a way is normal, because those who are interested in Trump, J.D. Vance, etc. are already hardcore supporter of Orban, so they're already convinced, and those who are undecided are unlikely to decide their vote because of the vice president of the US. They're going to be deciding more about local issues, the state of the economy, the question of Ukraine, etc., etc. So I don't think J.D. Vance is going to move things or be a decisive factor. It's also remember that even if Orban is very sympathetic to Trump is not necessarily like super popular by himself. Like probably Hungary is the country where he's among the most popular, but still, it's not exactly a consensual figure. Yeah, and those who could have been convinced by Trump, by J.D. Vance, already vote for Orban and have made their mind. So now I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. I agree with Andros. Although the newer scandals, who knows? Like in the final week of campaign, it might move a little bit the needle for some undecided, but wait and see. I mean, again, until the day of voting, we will not know. All right. So US President, just showing, putting that there. Okay. So US Vice President JD, I don't know why I want to call him president yet. It seems like Orban's strategy during this campaign is a little mess, or it's just me. Andrew, I'll let you tell us what you think on the ground, but I don't think it's. I mean, Orban is desperate. He's desperate to stay in power because that's the first time he's actually threatened by the current campaign, and he's been like kind of having a desperate energy of trying to throw everything he has at Ukraine. He's been trying to make everything about Ukraine, about the risk of war, etc., to kind of divert attention from actually like local issues, so the state of the economy, that sort of thing. It's a mess. Yeah, okay, so you have your answer there, but yeah, you really have the sense of the energy of despair from Orban. And it's been extremely violent as a campaign. Like people are throwing stuff left, right, and center at each other, scandals and everything. So it's really tons of AI campaigning, etc., etc. So it's definitely not what I would say a chill campaign. Compared to previous campaign, which had very precise machine-like tempo, the current one is chaotic. Probably because, actually, contrary to the previous ones, he's not the one deciding the tempo. Like, I think we discussed that on the previous stream. Like, Orban has been pretty much, during the entire campaign, he's been consistently on the defense. He hasn't managed like to really set himself the tempo. He's been trying to put the topic of Ukraine front and center, but he's been very much on the defensive throughout the campaign, and he hasn't really managed to get out of that. And so that means that when you're on the defensive, you're kind of responding to what's happening on the spot and trying to throw something to divert the attention and everything. He's in power since 16 years. 2010, the first time he was... not the first time, he was president, he was prime minister before, but since 2010, uninterrupted. He also switched campaign organizer from last time. Didn't he get like someone from the Trump team to come to help him? Like, I know there's been like we know that there's the Russian have sent people, but I think he also had like Trump people, some of the Trump people involved in his campaign. If I recall correctly, I vaguely remember like that he brought some people from the US on that, or maybe it was the previous election. I don't remember. He didn't really have a strong opponent for him to be desperate. Before and no. Like previously, you had one. I mean, the irony is that at some point you had a united opposition, like from the centrist and the liberals and the left. What was it? Momentum, I think it was called, Andros. They tried during the last campaign and like they just got squashed. I think like he won like a super majority almost. So yeah, no, he was never threatened like that until now, because until now his opponents were always trying to be like the radical opposite to Orban. So campaigning on liberal and leftist kind of a platform, like an actual opposite to Orban. There, it's different because it's someone who used to be part of Fidesz, so the party of Orban, who is leading and basically trying to. By default, he has all the people on the liberals and the left in his side, because they would vote for a potted plant if he can get them rid of Orban. And he also manages, because he's also very conservative, and we'll read his profile after. He manages to get the voters from Orban away from him, and that's where it's dangerous for Orban, and that's what makes him desperate, because Orban doesn't have a reserve in terms of electorate. He doesn't have a voting reserve. He has what he has, and Tissot by default has everything on the center and the left. He doesn't even have to do anything related to liberals and the left. He actually is trying to not do anything on their platform, because he knows they're going to vote for him. So he doesn't have to do anything, and he's trying to fight on the turf of Orban to get those voters away from Orban. Trump. Yeah. It's an article that was initially published in English and actually from last week. Yeah. All right. So let's actually read the article. So US Vice President J.D. Vance on Tuesday insisted that Brussels, rather than Washington, was interfering in Hungarian politics before a crunch election on April 12th, which will decide the future of key MAGA ally Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Vance's criticism of the EU came amid a full-throated endorsement of Orban, although he denied he was trying to boost the flagging campaign of the Kremlin-aligned leader who has run Hungary for the past 16 years. Yeah, sure, he's in Hungary just out of coincidence. No, of course he was there to try to boost as much as possible Orban's campaign. Now, I don't expect, of course, the people of Hungary to listen to the Vice President of the United States. That's not primarily why I'm here. Bullshit. He said at a press conference at the Hungarian Prime Minister's office. But I did want to send a signal to everybody, particularly to the bureaucrats in Brussels, who have done everything that they can to hold down the people in Hungary because they don't like the leader, who has actually stood up for the people of Hungary. And I think it's important to say that he added. So he's playing the good old narrative, Orban defending the interest of Hungarians versus the external power of Brussels. Back in the day, it was about Soros. Is this talking, Andros? Sorry, Andros, I'm going to put you on the spot a lot today. It's final week of before the Hungarian elections. You're Hungarian, so yeah, you're gonna get. You're basically my co-host for today. And have they made a whole thing about Soros this year? Because normally, like Soros is kind of the black sheep that Orban used to wave around in the previous campaign as, oh look, the foreign powers under Soros are trying to influence the election, etc. I don't think I haven't seen like that as many posters with Soros. I think Zelensky has replaced the figure of Soros as the devil that he's trying to influence and attack the interest of Hungary. No Soros this time. I mean, at some point he would have had to phase out Soros. I mean, the Soros is what, like he's 90 something, like Soros now. I think he's like 92 or something like that. 95 years, yeah. I think at some point you can sort of phase him out as the big figure that is going to destroy Hungary. Let me go back to my page. At a rally later in the day, he doubled down, saying he heard the EU sneers against the normal, God-fearing people of Hungary. Peter Magyar, Orban's challenger in Sunday's election, has indeed accused Vance of interference, tweeting, "No foreign country may interfere in Hungarian elections. This is our country." Magyar added on X that Hungarian history is not written in Washington, Moscow, or Brussels. And you will know that he adds Brussels to the list because Magyar has been extremely careful in the campaign to try to not appear as the guy from Brussels. Like, basically, he says, yeah, okay, I want to reestablish decent relations with Brussels, but I'm not like the guy from Brussels. So he voted against von der Leyen during the motion of censure. He voted against, he's been trying to not appear as close to the EPP and I was going to say Viktor Orban. Yes, of course, Viktor Orban, but Manfred Weber. So he's been trying to maintain that distance with Brussels to not feed the campaign of Orban, where Orban is trying to make him the guy who represents actually Germany and Brussels and Ukraine, etc., etc. Peter Magyar basically promotes himself as a non-corrupt younger version of Orban. Ideologically, he's closer to him than any of his previous. Yeah, of course, yeah. I mean, he used to be part of the close circle of Orban, for sure. That's why I was saying that in previous from previous streams, that like, don't imagine that Peter Magyar is going to be this super liberal guy that's going to be the exact opposite of Orban. No, the guy is very conservative. Like, it's still going to be like a very conservative, very right wing kind of government. It's just that he's going to be that, most likely without all the attacks on the rule of law, on Brussels and everything. So, like, don't imagine that it's going to be like the radical change in terms of... it's not going to be a revolution, like, on that front. So Vance's anti-EU remarks in Budapest echoes Orban's own campaign narrative about European officials interfering and trying to turn Hungarian against him. He has sought to portray Magyar, leader of the center-right TSO party, as a stooge of both Brussels and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. US President Donald Trump has already issued several endorsements of Orban, a proponent of illiberal democracy, but polls suggest those interventions have done little to move the dial in the campaign. While arguing Orban was a model of leadership for Europe more widely, Vance said Viktor Orban has been the single sound leader in Europe on the question of energy security and independence. It is funny to watch the prime ministers and leaders in some of the Western European capitals talk about the energy crisis when, frankly, they should have been following the policies of Viktor Orban in Hungary, and if they had, the energy crisis that they were experiencing would be a lot less bad. Actually, I was reading an article that was actually interesting on that point, specifically on the argument of energy security, saying that Vance is saying, oh yeah, you people should do like Orban on energy instead of doing the woke greening agenda of Brussels, and etc. etc. And so I was reading an article today, like in Euractiv, I think. Actually, the article was explaining that the fact that indeed, like, the price of energy is one of the lowest in Europe currently was not really because of the reasons JD Vance or the MAGA would like, in the sense that there's two key reasons why the prices of energy are relatively low, lower in Hungary. One reason is massive subsidies. The Orban has been throwing like shit tons of money at energy, like to basically cap the price of energy. So no matter the price of raw energy like gas, oil, etc., the final price for consumer is capped by law. And so basically, it's a subsidy from the state to basically ensure that people do not have to pay extra money regardless of the price of energy. So you have that, which costs a lot of money to the state, which is not exactly a MAGA-friendly kind of policy. And also, and that I didn't know, that actually over the years, like in Hungary, there was massive investments in solar energy, and like Hungary is like the second biggest producer of solar energy per capita in Europe after Spain. And so, because they have invested massively in building like solar panel energies, that has driven down the reliance on other energies, and therefore also a bit the prices. So I thought it was interesting because it's true that I would not have guessed about the importance of solar energy in Hungary. So I found that interesting, which, of course, that again doesn't at all go in the narrative of Trump and the likes, because green energies like solar panels, not really a Trump thing. There's also a profit margin that they get on the price difference between Russian. They also have this factor, but. In any case, I thought that article was interesting on energy security. I didn't take it for today because I had to like I said, I have a bit to speedrun today's stream, but it's an interesting article that was on Euractiv today, so go read it. It was interesting. Okay, those remarks refer to Orban's insistence that Hungary should be allowed to continue to import discounted energy from Russia rather than cutting those supplies to support Ukraine. Trump has previously praised Orban as one of the strongest world leaders, and the Hungarian Prime Minister anticipated MAGA's obsession more than a decade ago with his assertive nationalism, his contempt for the EU, and his success in asserting influence over Hungary's media and public institutions. Although you could say, in a way, the real precursor to MAGA is Berlusconi. I would argue that Orban is the evolution of Berlusconi, and that Trump is like the more modern version of what Orban and Berlusconi did in their day, back in their day. But I think like that sort of right-wing populism, the roots in Europe, it's more Berlusconi than Orban. The US Vice President's trip, however, appears unlikely to swing an increasingly bitter race in which Orban is trailing on average by a significant margin, according to the pollsters. His rivals attribute their lead in the polls to their laser-focused attacks on the weakness of the Hungarian economy and on the corruption and cronyism associated with Orban. Perceptions of the current US administration have been turning more negative in Hungary, said Mario Birkarski, an analyst at risk intelligence company Veris Maplecroft. Vance's visit could have the opposite effect on Orban's popularity than the one intended. Orban and Vance continued to riff off each other at a rally later in the evening at a football stadium. The event was officially built to celebrate the Day of Hungarian-American Friendship, but its campaign purpose was clear. Orban pointedly praised Vance and his Munich speech last year, in which the vice president chastised the Europeans for ignoring the will of their people, overturning elections, ignoring religious freedoms, and not acting to halt illegal immigration. On reaching the stage for this speech, Vance phoned Trump. On his first attempt, the call went to voicemail, but after getting through, Vance put Trump on the speaker. "I'm a big fan of Victor," Trump announced, praising Orban as a fantastic man who did not allow people to storm your country and invade your country like the people have and ruined other countries. Again, Vance focused much of his speech on the bureaucrats in Brussels who should not be listened to. "We have to get Orban re-elected as Prime Minister of Hungary, don't we?" Vance told the supporters of the governing Fidesz party to rapturous applause. So that's the last foreign joker of Orban in his sleeve, getting a vice president of the US to endorse him and his narrative. Unlikely to move really the needle that late in the game, but well, I guess that at this stage Orban will take whatever support he can get. So that's on the Orban side. Now I want to focus more on the opponent, Peter Magyar, who we haven't talked that much. I mean, apart from like fairly high level kind of description, we'll go into an actual profile of him and how he came to become like the figure of the opposition to Orban. That's why JD Vance is a Russian plant. He was also on the one who sabotaged the Oval Office meeting. Now, JD Vance is not a Russian plant. Like, he's a true isolationist, American isolationist. Like, I'm struggling tonight. Identitarian isolationist. Like, for instance, like Vance, he's not happy about the thing about the war in Iran or the intervention in Venezuela, because in his view, like he says, the US should focus on the US, the rest of the world can burn. He doesn't give a shit. Yeah, Christian nationalist conservative. Yeah, so he's not really in favor of the US meddling with the world affairs. So yeah, the world can go fuck itself. We should focus just on ourselves and do nothing else. So he's not really a Russian plant. Like, he's very American, like as a product. And at this stage, the most likely to follow to be the successor of Trump. But anyway, going back to Peter Magyar. I'm just checking the time. Yeah, we're good. So, the leader of the opposition of the TISO party. So, Peter Magyar's revolt, the insider challenging Hungary's Viktor Orban. Even among his supporters, the opposition leader is a polarizing figure. Few outside Hungary's tight political circles had heard of Peter Magyar until he unleashed a blistering critique of the government, complete with a secret audio recording of his wife, then Justice Minister Judith Varga. The 2023 recording, made without Varga's knowledge, captured her describing alleged government interferences in a corruption scandal. It helped fuel an explosive scandal that propelled Magyar from a mid-level civil servant into a political force, setting him up to mount the most serious challenge yet to Hungarian Prime Minister's 16-year grip on power. As Magyar rides a commanding lead in the polls ahead of the April 12th parliamentary election, he has galvanized disillusioned voters across the political spectrum, turning his upstart TISO movement into a vehicle for those seeking to end Orbán's rule. A TISO victory would not only break Fidesz 16 years old on power, but could also reshape Hungary's role in Europe, easing Budapest's clashes with Brussels over the rule of law, reducing its alignment with Moscow, and restoring the country as a more predictable partner inside the EU and NATO. So Orbán has been prime minister. Right now he's 16 years in a row. So since 2010 he's prime minister. He has been prime minister before in Hungary before 2010. I think he's been prime minister like 2 or 3 times before that, give or take, at the end of the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, if I recall correctly. And just correct me, but I think he did like 2. Only 1? I thought he did more than that. Okay, my bad. My bad. Okay, so only 1 stint before that. I don't know why I remember 2 or 3. Maybe it's his attempts in the election, and he only won 1. Okay, well, doesn't matter. So yeah, he's been there a long time. And the irony being that Orbán, historically, the way Orbán became like a political figure in Hungary is that he was the leader of the students' organizations during at the end of the Soviet occupation, Soviet occupation / regime. He was the leader of the students' union that did strikes at the end of the Cold War. He was on the barricades, so he was really the leader of the liberal wing of the youth movement, and then created his party, Fidesz. So yeah, it's ironic to see someone who used to be literally on barricades as a liberal leader, then turning his own country into a neoliberal kind of state. Pretty ironic as a how can I say that, as a trajectory. So yet, even among those backing his bid to topple a regime he calls corrupt and authoritarian, Magyar remains a deeply polarizing figure, according to interviews with more than 15 of the opposition leader's allies, rivals, supporters, and critics. While he has drawn support across the political spectrum by promising to tackle corruption and restore democratic norms, his abrasive style and past inside the Fidesz system, including positions aligned with Orbán on migration and Ukraine, have left parts of the opposition uneasy. Peter Markizai, I'll go for Zay, the opposition's 2022 candidate, called him arrogant, self-centered, and mean, before adding that such trait may be exactly what's needed to withstand the pressure from Orbán's machine. "We are not going to marry him," Markizai said. "It's just, we need somebody to put Orbán behind us." So yeah, basically it's like, the only thing he has for him, like if you are from the left, you're Hungarian leftist or liberal, like the only thing you need is that you're not Orbán. That's enough for us, pretty much. Magyar grew up listening to discussions about Hungarian politics at the dinner table. His father was a lawyer and his mother was a senior Supreme Court official. His extended family included Ferenc Medal, who served as president from 2000 to 2005, and his grandfather, Pál Eros, a television commentator dispensing legal advice from screens across the country. From an early age, he was immersed in the country's post-communist, Christian democratic intellectual establishment, a background that shaped his ambition for public life, said Miklos Szukocs, a political scientist and media researcher at the University of Copenhagen, who has written about Magyar's political rise. As he matured, Magyar joined Orbán's ruling Fidesz party and became a well-connected insider within it, forging close ties with senior figures, including Gigerliulas, I apologize, Andros, I'm going to butcher your language, during their student years in Germany. Gulyás is now the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. We lived in Hamburg together, so we had a very strong connection, Magyar told Politico in a 2024 interview. He did not respond to a request for an interview for this article in time for this publication. He met Varga in 2005 at a party organized by Gulyas. They married a year later. All the old opposition figures who lost are hoping to return once Orban is gone, but Magyar will make sure to keep them far away to hold on to his electorate. It's more likely he will keep Orban around as a scarecrow, like Orban did with Gyurcsány? I mean, to be fair, I don't see Orban retiring. Like, somehow I don't think that if he loses, he's gonna say, oh, well, fine, I'll retire into my castle, in my the castle I built with EU funds, etc. Like, I think he's gonna be leader of the opposition. So yeah, I think Orban will stay around. As Varga rose through the ranks of Fidesz, from a European Parliament lawmaker's assistant to justice ministers in 2019, like, ironically, I did not know her when she was in Parliament. I have like, my former roommate knew her when she was an MEP assistant. So she, back then, Fidesz was part of the EPP, so the group my MEP was working for. So technically we were part of the same group, and my roommate was telling me, like, when she after she got nominated to become minister, he was telling me, I knew her actually, and she's nice and moderate and everything, but yeah, now I guess now she's in politics, actual politics, and so yeah, she had to become a bit more hardcore. So from a European Parliament lawmaker's assistant to justice minister in 2019, Magyars remained on the periphery, first as a stay-at-home father in Brussels, and later in mid-level roles in Hungary's EU representation and other state institutions. Magyar repeatedly sought higher positions in the government without success. The ministers always said no because he was too ambitious and independent, said Sukoc. So his ambitions was put down and it boiled. The imbalance bred frustration, Sukoc added. He was somewhat resentful for many years that Varga was handpicked. During the 2024 interview, Magyar offered a glimpse of how he viewed the relationship. You were married to Ms. Varga, and that's what kick-started the whole process, the interviewer began, only to be interrupted by Magyar. She was married to me. The couple divorced in March 2023 in what Magyar has described as a break partly driven by political differences. Varga has accused him of physical and verbal abuse, including locking her in a room. Magyar dismissed claims as propaganda orchestrated by Orban's entourage. A court has not issued a ruling on the matter. Magyar had long been seen within the party as sharp-tongued. During his time at the EU representation, so the EU representation, as a reminder, the EU representation is kind of the embassy of the country to the EU institution. So you had the Hungarian embassy to Belgium. The Hungarian embassy to the EU is what we call the EU representation. So during his time at the EU representation, he earned a reputation for challenging visitors from Budapest. He has a very stubborn character, said one person who used to work with Magyar, comparing the opposition leader to his former boss at the Hungarian EU representation, Oliver Warhelyi, who reportedly screamed and swore at staffers. Oliver Warhelyi, who is now the Hungarian commissioner in the European Commission. As his relations with Varga deteriorated, the criticism blossomed into rupture. In January 2023, 2 months before the divorce, Magyar secretly recorded Varga describing how government officials had interfered in a corruption case. In a documentary movie filmed later, he said he had been seeking insurance in case he and Varga fell out with the regime. For months, Magyar stayed silent, wary of the impact on their 3 children. He went on a pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. Then came the opening. In February 2024, a pardon scandal forced Varga and President Katalin Novak to resign over the granting of clemency to a pedophile's accomplice. Varga, until then Fidesz lead candidate for the European Parliament election later that year, declared she was ending her candidacy. Accused, and basically everyone, like the story is that you had a scandal of pedophilia in an orphanage, and so there were condemnation, and one of the guy who basically looked the other way and de facto helped the pedophile was condemned, and he was pardoned by the government, by the president of Hungary, who has the power to pardon, to issue pardon, on a recommendation of the Minister of Justice, in this case Varga, so the ex-wife of Magyar. But pretty much everyone knows that it's not Varga who came up with the idea. It's Orban who said, "Okay, you're gonna pardon this guy," and gave the instruction to Varga and then the president Katalin Novak to offer the pardon to that guy, which of course didn't went well when the information leaked, as Orban has been making the defense of family values, children and everything a cornerstone of his ideology. And everybody knew that Orban was the one who actually gave the order to pardon the guy. So accusing Fidesz of hiding, Fidesz official of hiding behind women's skirts, Magyar went public, denouncing the government in a blistering Facebook post in February 2024. Magyar's credibility came from his profile, a Fidesz insider publicly accusing the system of corruption. He quickly moved from social media to independent outlets, becoming the first prominent defector from Orban's camp to attack the regime from within and drawing tens of thousands of frustrated voters amid high inflation and a cost of living crisis. After a protest in March drew roughly 50,000 people, he began building a team of business people and public figures to launch a movement. Desho Farkas, an entrepreneur who was among the first invited to join, said the group saw a rare opening. "That was the first meeting and we decided, let's start the party," he told Politico. Within weeks, they were preparing to contest the June European Parliament election. At first, Magyar struggled to recruit allies. Peter couldn't invite any of his friends because everyone was from Fidesz, Farkas said. 6 people quit after the initial meeting. Everyone was so scared of potential retaliation, Farkas said. Some of them at big companies and feared that Orban's government would come down hard on them, he added. While Magyar served as the face of the movement, Farkas coordinated operations behind the scenes. He described the party as a startup, with theater director Mark Radnai shaping media strategy and actor-influencer Ervin Nagy mobilizing crowds. They quickly built the infrastructure to compete, setting up a donation network and an IT system to reach supporters and recruiting thousands of volunteers. "We got 100,000 emails in February and March," Farkas said, describing an organization struggling to keep up with surging demand. To run in the 2024 European Parliament election, the group took over a small, little-known party, rapidly building out its digital presence and local networks. The result was a breakthrough. TISO won 29.6% of the vote, while Fidesz dropped to 44.82%, its lowest total ever. The thing that I don't quite get, like, did they actually create TISO, or was there already a party called TISO that they basically took over? They say, "Yeah, now that's mine, and I'm taking that over." Like, that's. I'm a bit confused by the fact they say they took over a small, little-known party. Like, it seems to imply that TISO was something that was already existing. Andros, any info on that? Continuing in the meantime. Magyar supporters see him as an insider who used to know these people, who was sitting in the first row of Orban's system, said Katalin say, an unaffiliated member of the Hungarian parliament, and used to be a member of the European Parliament as a liberal. She was part of Momentum, I think. It was too short before the election, so they need a party that was already registered, so they took over Tissot. Ah, okay, so that would... Okay, they just said that now that's mine. Okay, interesting. Oh, sorry. Sneeze. Like I said, I was sick this weekend, sorry. Oh, apologies. His appeal, she added, is that he is viewed as somebody who understands the system and is capable of beating it. Magyar, meanwhile, doubled down on campaigning. To break through the tight control Fidesz maintains on much of the country's media, he began touring the country. In May 2025, he walked 250 kilometers from Budapest to Oradea in northwest Romania to win the support of ethnic Hungarian minorities in neighboring countries who mostly vote Fidesz. Meanwhile, he used Facebook to respond rapidly to events and reach voters directly. The party set up grassroots networks known as Tissot Island to amplify his message even within Fidesz strongholds. Magyar has something that's very rare in politics today, Tissot EU Affairs Chief and MP candidate Martin Agiu told Politico. He speaks the language of the algorithm, but he builds trust in person, and he can keep up with the speed of the news cycle without losing strategic clarity. Ahead of the April 12 election, Magyar continues to tour up to 6 cities a day. Indeed, that requires stamina. Have you ever seen him, Andros, at a rally or something? You're from Budapest, huh, if I remember correctly. Removing some notifications. Yeah. There's no doubt there is a significant social support behind Tissot, said Andras Serpalkovic, the mayor. How the fuck am I supposed to say that? Tsekesfer Ervar. Close enough. I don't want to hear otherwise. That's gonna be that. So this town in central Hungary, and a member of Fidesz who is considered one of the party's few independent voices. I think that this match is going to be a very tight one. But as Tissot has grown, so too have the questions about the man at the center. Farkas, one of the party's founders, quit after the 2024 European elections as the early startup ethos gave way to internal jockeying for power. He briefly returned only to leave again, describing the internal culture as increasingly toxic and reminiscent of the Fidesz system Magyar once served. Okay, Székes Fair Air War. Okay, I'm trying again. Székes Fair Air War. Yeah, I was almost that. That was almost that. I'm sorry, like I'm just speaking with an accent from the southwest of Hungary. That's why. My teacher was a rural one. What was I? The culture inside the party got something similar. Loyalty-based, not performance-based, Farkas told Politico. Magyar runs Tissot from the top down. In the 2024 interview with Politico, he described his party as a one-man show. He is the only party member permitted to give interviews, although a select few are allowed to provide brief comments to the media. Tissot press team asked journalists not to conduct interviews with attendees at a March 15 protest, and volunteers who spoke to Politico said they had been asked not to by their superiors. Supporters argue the discipline is necessary. A tightly controlled message, they say, is the only way to avoid giving pro-government media ammunition and to keep the party focused on its singular goal of removing Orbán. Observers also praise Magyar's sharp rhetoric, his seemingly limitless energy on the campaign trail, and his uncanny ability to preempt Orbán's attacks. There have been no real scandals that burned on him, said Peter Kreko, director at independent political consultancy Political Capital. Maybe it's because he has warned his voters base in advance all the time. Magyar has also tried to improve his credibility by surrounding himself with top business executives and professionals, casting himself as a competent alternative to Fidesz political class. And yet, he has been betrayed by his own impulsive streak, from public outbursts at journalists to report of an aggressive confrontation at a nightclub. He leans into the image, styling himself as a tough, masculine leader, posing, for example, in a Facebook post wearing a sweatshirt emblazoned with the phrase, "The Man." It's part of a personality he has folded into his brand as a fighter ready to take on Orbán. Asked in the documentary how he would describe himself, Magyar replied, "A difficult one," adding that he is trying to improve. For his many supporters, those flaws are beside the point. Magyar has come to represent something larger than himself. The first plausible chance in years to remove Orbán from power. "We are not voting for Tiso, we are voting against Fidesz," said Timiás Szwapó, a member of the Hungarian parliament from the Green Party who stepped down to clear the way for a Tiso candidate. That's the whole point. Hungarian would vote for a goat at this point if it was running against Orbán. Which, in the context of this campaign, is helpful for Magyar because he has absolutely no opposition. Like, there's a again, Andrew, stop me if I'm wrong, but there's a 5% threshold, meaning that if you have a party that makes less than 5% at the elections, they don't get any MPs. In the polls, you have Fidesz, Tiso, so Orbán and Magyar, and then all the other parties are below 5%. Like, I think there's one far-right party that is like around 5%. All the others are below. So it's really like the whole election is just a duel between Orbán and Magyar. And like I was saying earlier, like Magyar doesn't need to campaign the liberals or the left. They're going to vote for him no matter what. So that's why, like, he's not trying to talk about like liberal values, leftist values, or making promises like this or whatever. He doesn't need to. They're going to vote for him no matter what. And despite Orbán attempts to trap him into going into like a liberal leftist agenda that he can then use to say, look, he's actually a liberal and a leftist, don't vote for him, stay with me. Magyar has been careful not to fall in these traps. Like, for instance, when Orbán banned the gay pride in Budapest, Magyar didn't say a single thing. He didn't intervene at all in the debate. Like, he didn't say, yes, we need to defend the pride, the gay pride in Budapest. He didn't say a single thing about that. He didn't get involved because for him, it was a losing battle. If he was speaking about that, Orbán would have jumped on the occasion and say, look, he's an LGBTQ plus activist, dangerous woke leftist. Don't vote for him. The only real conservative in town is me. The other is just like a woke traitor. %, but all the votes on the list matter in the total as well. There are many who step down to make sure all opposition votes go to Tiso candidate, but those who did not are now being pressured heavily to step down, even threatened in some cases. Yeah. Where am I? Okay. So Peter Markizai, the 2022 United Opposition leader who failed at toppling Orbán and who is also a conservative, said Magyar will have to prove he can deliver if he is to maintain his support should he win the election. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to say, and I didn't finish my thing. So yeah, right now it's useful for Magyar to have like everyone being ready to vote for him, no matter what they think of him. Like, he's not Orbán, so that's all they need from him. They were going to vote for him, whatever he says. That's going to become a problem after the elections. Because sure, he will have X% of the people will have voted for him, but they're not united behind his program. The only thing they voted for is that he's not Orban. That means that after the election, well, you will see divisions again in the public debate, which will then weaken him because those who supported him actually are not a united bloc behind Magyar and his ideas. It's a much more like a kind of desperate attempt. And the second he becomes prime minister, this bloc will start breaking apart. While Orban, I mean, the thing that will be interesting to see is whether, if Orban loses, whether he will manage to keep control of the electoral base. So the people who vote Fidesz for this Monday or for this election will stay loyal to Orban, or whether an important part of them will switch to Tiso and Magyar because he's the new guy in power. That will be interesting to see, like how much of an electoral base Orban managed to maintain after a potential loss in the election on Sunday. Because if he manages to keep a strong hold on his current electoral base, that will make him very dangerous for Tiso afterwards, because Tiso is going to bleed support left, right, and center, because all those who are actually leftists or liberals, they're not going to support Magyar afterwards. Like, they'll be like, okay, yeah, good, you kicked out Orban, but now we have our own policy, we disagree with you on substance, which will then reduce his actual political weight compared to Orban, who would potentially maintain his strong control of an important part of the electorate. Where was I? There is so much pressure behind him, he said, but these waves are also ready to crush him if he doesn't fulfill his promises, which include putting Orban behind bars and restoring democracy and the rule of law. If he does not do that, we will definitely not tolerate him anymore, he said. So yeah, exactly my point. The second after the election, support is going to bleed left, right, and center. Do we have question on our dear Peter Magyar? I still have an article on him, but just on his profile. The next one is still on Magyar, but this time on his need to balance Brussels and Budapest. The closing statement is just wishful thinking. Yeah, I would be surprised indeed if they put Orban in prison. That I think is a bit wishful thinking. I agree. Unless they found a huge cache of documents that are damning evidence of Orban being a traitor or something like that, Orban is not going to prison. Unlikely. I mean, the best case scenario is Tiso restoring some level of rule of law and democracy, but then again, that depends on whether or not he gets the 2/3 majority in the parliament, which is necessary to unblock a lot of the safeguards that Orban has built into the system to protect his legacy against a potential loss at elections. All right. So let's continue. Final article on him. Orban has made sure to keep his hands clean. It's his relatives and oligarchs who have made big profits, not him really. I mean, I'm sure that Orban has been smart enough to try to keep his hands clean, or at least prevent traces from going directly to him. But yeah, if Tiso wins, yeah, the oligarchs around Orban are not going to enjoy. And I think there was an article actually on Euronews about that, like talking about how you already see a number of the oligarchs and the people around around Orban that are starting to evacuate money outside of Hungary just in case Magyar is winning, and they would be asked, how did you get that money in the first place? Alright, let's continue. So, between Budapest and Brussels, Peter Magyar's political tightrope. The leader of Hungary's opposition, Tiso party, has prioritized domestic campaigning over his parliamentary duties, at times defying his European Parliament group to appeal to voters while distancing himself from EU figures like Ursula von der Leyen. Peter Magyar has worked so hard to avoid being labelled a Brussels puppet by his rival Viktor Orban that he's barely been seen in Brussels at all. The leader of TISO, Hungary's main opposition party, has largely treated his MEP role as a platform to confront the country's current prime minister and boost his campaign in Budapest ahead of the April 12 election. Yet, since he was elected an MEP in 2024, Magyar never drafted any parliamentary report, he signed only one resolution in a chamber that produces dozens each month, and, according to many colleagues, rarely attended committee sessions. Basically, the guy is a ghost. Magyar's last appearance was in Strasbourg in January, when he voted in favor of referring the EU-Mercosur trade deal to the Court of Justice. It appears that his participation in plenary votes is indeed rather low, around 21% since the beginning of the term, which is extremely low by parliament standards. Sedo Frontescu, an analyst from the EU Matrix, a think tank that provides insights and data on the EU institutions. This means that he is focused on internal politics not only recently, but even before. This reflects a clear mission. From the outset, Magyar has prioritized unseating Orban after 16 years of largely unchallenged rule. To that end, the European Parliament has functioned as a springboard for his campaign launch, granting him immunity while also enabling him to forge alliances ahead of the crucial vote. This momentum was already evident in the June 2024 European election, when Magyar captured 30% of the votes with a party founded a few months before. Soon after, the EPP embraced, the Conservative, embraced Tiso's 7 MEPs, bringing them into the continent's largest political bloc. With polls suggesting he is on track to win, Magyar's campaign has intensified in recent months, forcing him to focus on rallies and campaign events in Hungary rather than Brussels. In all fairness, he was campaigning 24/7 and also building a party from scratch. Attending EP was really low. Yeah, that's. I mean, it was very clear from the beginning that the only objective for him was the parliamentary election, I mean the Hungarian election. So it's not a surprise that he's focusing on national issues. Although 21% even in plenary, that's very low. That's very low. Checking my phone. Up. I'm just waiting for something. Yeah, okay. We good. Où j'en suis? Okay. In addition, Magyar is far from alone. Many MEPs have historically used the European Parliament to advance national campaigns. In his case, however, a vast majority of MEPs support Magyar as the best alternative to Orban, who has become Brussels' nemesis, blocking key EU files with his vetoes. Against this backdrop, the Parliament has helped Magyar raise his political profile both at home and abroad. The only clash between Orban and him took place in the Strasbourg plenary during Hungary's EU Council presidency in October 2024. Following Orban's customary address to MEPs, Magyar took the floor to accuse him of turning Hungary into the EU's poorest and most corrupt member state. The exchange did not end there. Magyar later approached Orban and the two men shook hands, a photo that quickly went viral, casting Magyar in a favorable light as he appeared energetic next to Orban. Yet, an MEP's role is meant to balance European and national responsibilities. A balance that has shifted in recent years as many MEPs spend more time in Brussels and take a more active role in shaping EU policies. After all, the treaties clearly define MEPs' duties as playing a key role in shaping EU rules as they amend and vote on legislative proposals put forward by the European Commission and negotiate the final text with the Council representing EU countries. A lawyer by profession, Magyar was appointed member of two influential committees, the Constitutional Affairs, AFCO, and the Agriculture and Rural Development, AGRI. Of the two, I would say that AGRI is more politically important. Like AFCO, it's the committee where you talk about like the rules of parliament, the rules of the institution, the structure of the EU. So it's not like on a daily basis. It's not like the most politically important. It has some influence on some things at very particular point in time, but it's not like in general something that is extremely influential. Like is the EU intellectual kind of committee. Agri, on the other hand, yeah, it's important because you're talking about agriculture and the CAP fund. So yeah, that's kind of a politically important kind of thing, especially if you are conservative and trying to be close to farmers. Being agri is kind of useful. Sorry. I'm sorry for the ASMR. I hope it's not destroying your auditory experience. He has signed just one resolution on women's rights in Iraq, which is a bit surprising why he would do that, and submitted a single written question to the Commission regarding land confiscation practice tied to the historic Beneš decree in Slovakia affecting Hungarian minorities. So not a lot of activities, indeed. I have not much to say, as I have never seen him, one MEP who sits in the committee with Magyar told Euronews. Another one confirmed that Magyar's work at committee level has been greatly missed because of his campaign commitment in Hungary. That's greatest understatement of the year. He's been missed. We missed him for a couple of years now. Contacted by Euronews, many members of how many assistants does he have? I'm curious. Let's see. Peter Magyar Parliament. How big is his team? Boom, Peter Magyar. Actually, he's interestingly, in AFCO, he's a vice president, actually. He's vice president of AFCO. Interesting. Then member of Agri. And he has no substitute committee. Okay, interesting. How many assistants? 2 main, 2 in share. Okay. So yeah, he has a normal team, like two assistants. Is rather classic. The assistant grouping, that means that you have assistants that are shared among a group of MEPs. So likely what's happening is that the TISO MEPs, so they have 7 MEPs from his party, and each of the 7 is putting some money on the table to pay those 2 assistants who are then working for the collective. They're not attached to one MEP in particular. They're working for all the seven. So they may be. It depends of each delegation, but they may be working on communication for the delegation. They may be working on coordination of the voting positions in the various committee and for plenary, etc. So it's kind of the people who are the assistants who are working for the common interest of the entire delegation. Like they are not normally working for one MEP. So they appear on his page because he's partially funding paying the salary of these assistants, but they're not working exclusively for him. Like his actual personal assistants are those two. Those are shared. So yeah, 2 assistants. Yeah, that's a fairly standard. Although they must be doing only communication, because if they are, he doesn't do reports or amendments or whatever. Like, has he done meetings? Okay, the assistants are doing. Oh wait, it's Budapest, Brussels. Okay, so he hasn't registered. Actually, no, he hasn't done a lot of meetings. Like he has done what, 5 meetings since the elections? Like 2024, there was no meeting at all, and all of 2025, it was 4 meetings. 2 in Budapest, 2 in Brussels. Okay. And that... something on IMCO. Okay, yeah, probably something about the Hungarian company or something like that. Okay. Doesn't matter. Where was I? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Contacted by Euronews, many members of TISO declined to comment on Magyar's work in the parliament due to the political sensitivity surrounding the Hungarian elections. Others, however, argue that Magyar's opposition to Orbán places him in an unprecedented position compared with other MEPs. This is not a routine campaign. It's a system-defining election where Hungary's very EU membership is at stake, and it demands Peter Magyar full attention, a parliament official close to the TISO party told Euronews, claiming that physical absence from Brussels does not mean disengagement. He remains fully involved in all key decisions. When high-stakes choices arise, particularly on voting position, he often joins discussion directly, the official said, which would make sense because the way the TISO delegation votes in Strasbourg is going to be watched very closely by Fidesz in parliament and used potentially in the campaign. So I absolutely believe that when it comes to votes and the actual position of the TISO MEPs, it gets directly involved to decide what is the line of the party and the line that is most useful to his campaign back in Hungary. So that I absolutely fully believe that he's very involved in the voting strategy of the group. Up and go back there. Okay. Another official said that without his parliamentary immunity, he would have had problems getting to this point. Hungarian authorities requested Magyar's immunity to be lifted in 3 different legal cases, but the parliament rejected the request by a large majority. Within the EPP, Magyar's absence is noticed but generally accepted. He never participates in the group meetings, an EPP official told Euronews, added that it was mostly Zoltán Tár, the head of TISO delegation in the parliament, who represents the party in all the group's political discussions in Brussels or Strasbourg. EPP officials acknowledge that the group leadership has tolerated Magyar's limited involvement in group activities, viewing support for an EPP party's electoral success in Hungary as a higher priority. So basically they're saying, okay, you do what you need to do to win in Hungary, and we'll pretend that we're fine with it. Even if any other MEP would be doing the same, they would be getting shit from the leadership of the EPP. While TISO is seen as more pro-European than Orbán's Fidesz, Magyar has been careful to avoid political positioning in Brussels that might be unpopular at home, seeking to counter Orbán's narrative of him as seen as a Brussels puppet. Orbán has accused TISO of representing the EU and Ukraine's interest, a claim that Magyar rejects. For TISO, Ukraine's potential accession to the EU is a particularly sensitive issue. Although it is supported by most of the European Parliament, including the EPP, many of its voters remain skeptical. A similar tension exists within regarding the EU and the EPP's commitment to increasing support for Ukraine. In February 2026, TISO MEPs voted against the EU's proposed €90 billion loan to Ukraine, aligning with Orban's decision to veto it. TISO's margin of maneuver is limited. Having a diametrically opposite position to that of Fidesz would not be popular among a large part of the electorate, Frontescu said. They have to carefully balance between the position of the EPP and that of the current public opinion back home. On issues like migration and the environment, TISO acts as a bridge, largely aligning with its European political family while maintaining proximity to Fidesz stance. EU and Hungary need a strong external border protection, and we should fight together against illegal migration. I do not agree with the redistribution of asylum seekers across Europe, Magyar told Euronews in an interview in October 2024, a few months after his election as MEP. So yeah, there he's going to have like a position that is fairly Fidesz compatible in the sense of extremely critical of EU migration policy. So that's not surprising again. At times, efforts to appeal to the Hungarian electorate have created frictions between TISO and other parties within the EPP group. TISO has defied the EPP group stance 3 times recently, prompting internal sanctions. Its MEPs voted against the EU-Mercosur trade deal, citing the need to defend Hungarian farmers' interests, a move that led TISO lawmakers to be banned from speaking at the plenary session for 6 months. Huh? That's odd. Like the sanction that TISO got sanctioned by the EPPs that I knew, but for the Mercosur vote, not sure. Like they got sanctioned, but for the vote they had on the motion of censure against von der Leyen for the Mercosur, like I'm not sure there was actual sanction, especially for 6 months. Like I think that's the sanction they got for voting against von der Leyen, not for the EU-Mercosur deal. Alright, let's continue. Another sensitive issue is TISO's effort to distance itself from EPP chair Manfred Weber and Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, both depicted negatively by the Hungarian government and frequently shown alongside Magyar in Fidesz campaign posters. The positioning is reflected in its parliamentary behavior. TISO MEPs did not support von der Leyen in the last vote of confidence in January, a move widely seen as completely intentional, and that's the reason why they got sanctioned by the EPP, because the EPP had said, either you vote for von der Leyen or we're going to sanction you. And while the French, who traditionally vote against von der Leyen, decided not to risk the sanction and voted for von der Leyen, TISO, they voted against von der Leyen because it was seen as too important for their local campaign. And they got sanctioned because of that. We are thankful for the confirmation from Brussels that TISO politicians have no owner, Magyar wrote on Facebook at the time, signaling that his commitment to EPP and EU principles have consistently been secondary to domestic opinion. And to be fair, again, there he was Orban was waiting in ambush. If TISO had voted for von der Leyen, against the motion of censure against von der Leyen, Orban would have jumped on it to say, look, he is the puppet of von der Leyen is voting for her. Do we have any question on that article or on the Hungarian election before we move on to our next topic, which is going to be vetoes in EU foreign policy, which relates a bit to Hungary, but we're going to close on the elections themselves. Give you a minute. Just checking to make sure that I didn't miss any message. Sabotage. All right. All right, I don't see any question. Let's move on. All right. Vetoes. And foreign affairs. So, foreign affairs is one of the topics where, by default, when member states vote, it's a decision that is taken at unanimity. Every single member state needs to agree for the EU to take any kind of position. Because it's something that is seen as very close to sovereign powers, so there is a need for all member states to be aboard. The EU can only talk about or expose a position that is commonly shared. And that's why that's one of the reasons why the EU is relatively weak when it comes to foreign policy, is that since it can only take a position when there is common position, well, in quite a few cases, particularly in times of crisis, member states may have different interests, and therefore the EU is neutralized. To give you two opposite examples, when it comes to Ukraine, until recently, you have a consistent position of the EU. I say until recently because Orban then made it impossible to find common position, or much more difficult to find common position on Ukraine. Another example, opposite, is the conflict between Israel and Palestine, where there, the EU is basically absent of the debate because member states are divided between those who are more pro-Israel and those who are more pro-Palestine, to simplify to the extreme. And therefore, the EU cannot take a position. And recently, with the increase of vetoes used notably by Orban to block decisions on Ukraine and other key crises, there is increasingly a criticism made against that veto system on foreign affairs, saying, yeah, well, because of that, the EU becomes irrelevant at a geopolitical level, so we need to reform that. The question is how and to do what instead. So EU foreign policy shambles triggers calls for radical overhaul of diplomacy. From Ukraine's funding to Iran and Russia, repeated paralysis is reigniting a fight over the EU's veto system. I'm just checking that I still have some tea. Yes, I have some tea. I can survive a bit more. Europe's mounting foreign policy failures, from struggling to fund Ukraine to its fragmented response to the Iran war, are fueling calls for a root and branch overhaul of how the bloc conducts diplomacy. The EU's inability to take unified decisions, such as unblocking a 90 billion loan for Kiev, imposing sanctions on violent West Bank settlers, and implementing measures targeting Russia, exposes a systemic paralysis, 9 EU diplomats, officials, lawmakers, and experts told Politico. At stake is more than internal process. With conflicts escalating in the Middle East, Russia's war in Ukraine grinding on, and transatlantic relations under strain, diplomats says the EU risks sidelining itself at a moment when geopolitical decisions are moving faster than its system can handle. The EU basically becomes irrelevant on the international stage because it's simply not capable of taking any kind of decision. Frustration at the deadlock is spilling into the open, with a growing group of countries led by Germany and Sweden pushing to severely limit or totally scrap national vetoes that allow a single capital to block actions. We should abolish the unanimity principle in the EU in foreign and security policy before the end of the current legislative period, so as to be better capable of acting internationally and to be truly grown-ups, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadefull said Saturday, according to the German Funke Group. All the experience that we have gained over the recent weeks with aid for Ukraine and sanctions on Russia indicate this. Last month, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said that discussions about using qualified majority voting to make foreign policy decisions would come up again among leaders. The push comes as Hungary, less than a week out from its April 12 election, has repeatedly stalled major decisions, including the €90 billion loan to Kiev, heightening concerns in other capitals that EU foreign policy outcomes can be held hostage for domestic policy. Even if Prime Minister Viktor Orban were to lose power, diplomats warn the underlying problem would remain, with unanimity allowing any government to step into the same blocking role. It's terrible. I want to sneeze. Terrible. Sorry, ASMR. Sorry about that. Still have the leftover my cold from the weekend. There are serious problems in how we take decisions. Spanish socialist lawmaker Nacho Sanchez Amor, who sits on the Parliament's European Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee, told Politico. Every month there's a new issue that highlights this trend. We have to react. Another group, including France, Belgium and smaller member countries, which fear being steamrolled, are digging in to defend the veto right, arguing it is core to their national interest. Launching now a debate on European unanimity rules, I think, would be the shortest way to get into real trouble, Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever told reporters in Brussels last month. So, you have this group that considers that no, actually, wait a minute, these vetoes are pretty useful because, and that's the reason why historically they exist, my country may have a very particular interest, foreign affairs interest on a particular topic, and so it needs to be respected because otherwise the other are just going to steamroll me. Like for instance, your Cyprus. Yeah, you kind of want to keep the veto because that way you can't be steamrolled by France, Germany, and the big ones when Turkey is being discussed. Your France, you kind of have a particular foreign policy when it comes to Africa, to the US, etc., etc. So you want to be sure that your specific view on these topics is taken into account and not steamrolled. Although it's France, so the probability that France would be ignored is a bit less than if you are Cyprus, but still. Winepoint commends near universal agreement across European capitals. The system is not working. Look at the sanctions on the West Bank settlers. It's a total disaster, said a senior EU official with knowledge of the issue, referring to widely supported plans to impose sanctions against extremist Israeli settlers, but blocked by Hungary. We have 26 countries out of 27 in support, even Germany is in favor, but we cannot do anything because of one. Like other in the article, the official spoke under anonymity. Recent institutional tensions have reinforced the sense of drift. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and EU top diplomat Kaja Kallas have clashed over who should take the lead on foreign policy. Okay, I'll finish the paragraph and then explain. While French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot warned the Commission chief to respect the limits of a role during a gathering of EU ambassadors last month. So you have indeed a tough fight on who is supposed to speak for the EU on foreign affairs. Basically, who is seen as the voice of the EU. And the way things are designed, it's kind of made to divide the EU. I mean, not divide the EU, but make sure there is not centralized power on that topic. I explain. traditionally, like when you think about the person who is speaking for the EU, people think of the president of the Commission. The Commission is the one that does that proposes the laws for the EU, etc., etc. So it's kind of seen as the equivalent of a prime minister for the EU. So in this case, Ursula von der Leyen, especially since the first mandate, she's been intervening in a lot of crises, be it Ukraine, be it the COVID crisis, etc., etc. So she's seen and identified, including outside of the EU, as the person to talk to when it comes to EU. Problem? Oh, it depends on problem. Depends on how you see it. In the treaties, the president of the Commission does not have powers when it comes to foreign affairs. Foreign affairs, the one who is supposed to speak on behalf of the EU is not the president of the Commission, it's the president of the Council, of the European Council. In this case, Antonio Costa. He is the one who is supposed to speak on behalf of the EU. Why? Because the European Council represents member states and in its highest formation, the head of states and government. And since foreign affairs is an area where you have unanimity, it's very closely linked to national competencies, etc., etc., member states want to keep a very close control on what the EU is saying on foreign affairs. Hence, why the one who is supposed to speak with the voice of the EU on foreign affairs is supposed to be the president of the council, who answers to the head of states and government. So in this case, Antonio Costa. But since things could, of course, not be simple, otherwise it would not be fun, you have a third player in the room, which is Kaja Kallas, the High Representative on foreign affairs and defense. And Kaja Kallas is kind of or the job of High Representative is kind of a hybrid role. Because Kaja Kallas usually is referred as a commissioner. She's seen as a member of the commission. But actually, it's more of an in-between. Like, the High Representative, so Kaja Kallas, is both a member of the European Commission and the Council. Like, she's kind of playing the bridge between the Council, so member states, and the European Commission. By rights, she's the Vice President of the European Commission, but she's also chairing the discussions on foreign affairs in Council. So she's kind of one feet in each of the two institutions. She's not fully Commission, she's not fully Council. And she's kind of the in-between, the one who is negotiating things, etc., etc. But at the same time, the one who is supposed to speak on behalf of the EU is not even Kaja Kallas, it's another person, it's Antonio Costa, the President of the Council. So that builds a complete mess where you don't know who is to speak on behalf of the EU. Because, of course, in the case of von der Leyen is also trying to accumulate power for herself, and she consistently had the habit of intervening, including on foreign affairs, which piss off those who do not want the Commission to have powers in foreign affairs, and muddles the water on what's the role of Antonio Costa, what is the role of Kaja Kallas. So you have this kind of turf war and battles over who is competent on foreign affairs at the EU between the President of the Commission, the President of the Council, and the High Representative. Bearing in mind that the fact that this divide is built in the Council, built in the treaties, to weaken the Commission, basically. And that's why, so the French Foreign Affairs Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, tackled von der Leyen by saying, yeah, you're not supposed to speak on foreign affairs. The one who is speaking, it's Antonio Costa and Kaja Kallas, because they represent the view of the member states. Nonetheless, diplomats and officials say such tough battles are a symptom, not a cause. everyone understands that the European External Action Service, or the equivalent of a sort of EU Foreign Affairs Ministry, is not working as it should, said a second EU diplomat from a country that wants to keep the veto. There is a debate going on because everyone agrees the system is not optimal. But foreign policy remains a national competence and we should not move to qualified majority voting. Behind the scenes, discussions are already underway. Informal high-level exchanges are taking place between big member states, member countries, are exploring possible fixes, including giving foreign policy greater prominence in ambassador-level co-repair meetings. So the co-repair is the formation of the council where ambassadors are meeting, and let's say the highest level of decision making before the ministers, and reforming the EEAS to improve decision making, the diplomat said. But we don't have the answers yet, the diplomat acknowledged. So everyone agrees the system is broken. What do we need to replace it with? Question mark. For many, the real problem is unanimity. A third senior EU diplomat pointed to a telling episode from 2022 when Hungary's Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó took part in a meeting of the EU Energy Council where decision could be taken by qualified majority. He was being Szijjártó, lashing out in all directions, the diplomat said. But unlike in foreign policy, Budapest could be outvoted. He was shocked. He thought he was still in the Foreign Affairs Council, the diplomat added. In September, when the Energy Councils resumed, he was suddenly Mr. Charming, nice minister. So he understood that, oh yeah, shit, I can't bully my way around because I can be put in a minority. So if I want to get something, well, actually I need to be nice to the others. With French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz still at odds on the issue, think tanks and political parties are moving to shape the debate. The centre-right EPP has put forward proposals to reshape the EU foreign policy architecture, calling in its 2024 manifesto for replacing the EU's foreign policy chief with the EU foreign minister as vice president of the European Commission, which ironically was supposed to be the case initially. The high representative, when the job was first created as part of the now dead constitutional treaty back in 2004-2005, initially it was called the EU Foreign Minister. But after the defeat of that treaty and its death, in the later on, the name was changed to become High Representative, because calling that foreign ministry was seen as something too close to a state and not acceptable, notably to the Brits, and so they insisted on having it called like some kind of administrative title, like a High Representative, and not a foreign minister. And there the EPP wants to change the title to go back to what was the initial proposal back in 2004-2005 to clarify, okay, we have a EU foreign minister. And for establishing a Security Council that would also include partners such as the UK, Norway, and Iceland. So kind of a European format of NATO for coordination of security at a European level. Carnegie Endowment Senior Fellow Stefan Lehne has argued for similar structural changes, including folding the EEAS back into the Commission and creating a European Security Council to respond more quickly to emerging threats, including drones and missiles from Iran. The fact that our foreign policy structures are dysfunctional is understood by many people, Lehne told Politico. Foreign policy and security challenges are totally different from what they used to be. And to have no innovation in this area is strange to say the least. The idea of integrating the EEAS into the Commission has some backing, namely in the cabinet of the President of the Commission, he added. Why? Because again, the President of the Commission wants to get control over foreign policy, and so yeah, having foreign affairs coming back into the fold formally of the Commission, de facto under the control of the Commission, of the President of the Commission. Yeah, very much what von der Leyen would want. Not what the member states would want, because on the contrary, they want to keep foreign affairs out of the Commission at all costs because they don't want to reinforce the role of the President of the Commission. Not everyone is convinced. I think the Commission would very much like that, said the fourth EU diplomat, of folding the EAS into the EU executive, while a senior EAS official dismissed the idea more bluntly. Well, people write papers, that's their right. Sorry, just checking notification. Up. Sorry. Where was I? Yeah, for Sanchez Amor, the problem is less about structures than political will. We should use the fact that there are so many problems in decision making to think seriously about this. Let's gather the Council, the Parliament, the Commission and the High Representative to talk about this, he said, while cautioning against treaty change. Yeah, good luck about that. I mean... that doesn't solve the issue. The Council, the Parliament and the Commission will not agree on that. Like, that's not going to change anything. And treaty changes, again, like that's kind of a circular argument, in the sense that people are unhappy because there is no unanimity. So they want to change the system. But to change the system, you potentially need to change the treaties. And to change the treaties, you need unanimity, which sends you back to the initial problem that if you don't have unanimity on foreign affairs, you're not going to have it to change the treaties on foreign affairs. So it's kind of a circular argument that the lack of political consensus on, in this case, foreign affairs, kind of stops any kind of solution, because any kind of solution would de facto require unanimity to be implemented. So it's kind of a circular argument, and putting in the same room the Council, the Parliament, and the Commission will not solve anything because they simply don't agree. Like the key in that debate is not in the Parliament or the Commission. Or Parliament is probably the less relevant in the equation, but like the key to that is in the Council exclusively. Like either member states find an agreement on how to evolve on that issue, and then a solution can be found quickly, or they don't, and then the system just stay blocked until there is a consensus that is emerging. Sorry, I'm just I need to deal with this. Apologies. Up. There we go. All yours again, at least for a few minutes. All right. Other argue that actually it was the end of the article, so I was actually I should have pushed. Other argue the diagnosis is simpler. The basic problem has not changed. The basic problem of foreign policy is unanimity, said the third senior EU diplomat. You can create 1,000 institutions as long as you have unanimity. It can never work properly. Yes, to an extent, I kind of agree. And more than unanimity, I mean, the real problem beyond unanimity is the question of political consensus. If you do not have political consensus, unanimity de facto becomes a blocking factor. And if you don't have political consensus, you can't change or improve the situation in any way. Because those who have interest in keeping unanimity have no interest in the situation evolving one way or another. All right. Any questions on that before we go into our actual final article, which is going to be about a completely different topic, which is going to be industrial policy and competition policy. So can we build European champions? Right, still FT, I can survive for a final article. All right, no questions. Let's dive into it. Final article. Just sending message quickly. Bien. Von der Leyen's plan for more corporate mega deals spark competition jitters. As they revamp the EU's merger guidelines, trustbusters are skeptical of companies' arguments that European champions will bolster industrial resilience. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen plans to create European companies that can compete at a global scale against US and Chinese rivals, is raising fears that executives may use the policy to justify mergers that would normally be blocked. So the story of this article is the tension between industrial policy and competition policy. And what would be better, what would be best for the European economy? Do you think of the European economy as a regional economy, or do you look at it from a global perspective? And depending on that, you will favor either industrial policy or competition policy. Industrial policy tending to favor the emergence of the so-called EU champions, so giant European-wide companies, while competition policy will prefer to limit, on the contrary, the emergence of these giant European-wide companies because they crush any kind of competition on the EU market. That's a tension that has existed forever, that has seen a revive since the slow return of EU industrial policy. A little bit during the previous mandate, where you had the tension, the legendary opposition between Thierry Breton, the French commissioner for the single market and industrial policy, versus Margrethe Vestager, the commissioner to competition policy. The two of them embodying one side of this tension and clashing very clearly on that, and who would be the controlling one. And in this mandate, as we are seeing industrial policy kind of taking the advantage, well, the question of competition law has been put a bit in the back, but still makes a comeback to say, okay, we have competition law for a reason, don't forget it. So following recommendations from former Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi on how to build world-beating European companies, von der Leyen has pressed her competition chief Teresa Ribera to come up with a proposal this month to overhaul the way officials review companies' proposal to merge with others. So bear in mind that under competition law, the idea of competition law is to make sure that you don't have one company that is controlling the market. And that would be bad for consumers, because then that dominant company could impose its conditions on everyone, including the consumers, and that would not be the most beneficial scenario for consumers. Instead, you want to make sure that there is several actors on the market, and there is a fair competition. That way, it pushes to each company to provide the best conditions for consumers, because then consumers will decide who is the winner on the market. Because of that, whenever you have companies that want to merge, so two companies on the market say, hey, we should, instead of being competitors, we should be together, we should become a single company. Whenever you have this company that wants to do mergers, they can't do it like that. They have to ask the Commission, the European Commission, who has a very strong competence on competition policy and to protect the single market. And so whenever you have companies that want to merge together, they need to ask the permission of the European Commission, who will look at whether the two companies becoming one would become something that becomes too destabilizing on the market and therefore bad for competition and consumers, in which case they would either forbid the merger, say, yeah, no, you cannot merge together, we forbid it, you have to stay separate companies, or authorize it with conditions. For instance, they could say, okay, you can merge, but for instance, okay, to kind of protect this market, you have to cut out one part of the company. So instead of swallowing the entire company, you will need to sell one part of it to avoid you becoming dominant in that part of the market where that part of the other company is relevant. So they can condition the way companies can merge together. That's competition law. And again, the clash with industrial policy is that industrial policy, you want the emergence of these big European companies that merge together to become like huge actors on the European market. Why? Because again, there you don't look, under industrial policy, you don't look at the market from a strictly regional / European perspective, but from a global perspective. And in this idea, say, yeah, we're not actually competing only with European companies. We're competing on a global scale with American, Chinese companies or other companies that are extremely big, much bigger than the biggest European companies. And so if we want to be able to compete against those American and Chinese companies, we need to create big European companies as well. Otherwise, everyone is going to be eaten alive by these big American and Chinese companies. And so that's why you need the EU champions to counter global competition from the Americans, from the Chinese, or from other actors. And therefore, the competition law is nice, but we don't exist in only the European market. We have external threats. Hence why we would need European champions. Why the competition side of things would say, well, no, because then you're just killing you're killing competition on the European market, and that's bad for consumers, and that's also bad for many countries, because then only the biggest countries would take advantage of the situation. Where was I? There. The Commission President has signaled that she wants to give equal standing to resilience, the ability to withstand supply shocks, when reviewing merger deals alongside their impact on competition and innovation. CEOs with merger ambitions are already tasking highly paid advisors to craft narratives around the concept, which also serves strategic priorities like economic security and reducing dependence on expensive, unreliable, and climate-harming fossil fuels imports. But critics, including antitrust officials, are wary of applying this criterion too broadly in merger decisions. There is a real risk of resilience washing, former EU competition chief economist Tommaso Valletti told Politico. He added that the catchword was being used to dress up deals that are bad for competition. Resilience comes from diversification and redundancies. Fewer players mean more dependence, not less, said Valletti, who led the Commission's economic analysis of mergers between 2016 and 2019. If a merger leaves you relying on one large supplier for critical input, That is fragility, not resilience, he added, while declining to comment on specific deals. So basically, say, yeah, it's two different interpretations of resilience. Resilience can be you need to be big to fight other big actors and resist big international shocks, or resilience is having a lot of different actors that then you can rely on collectively, and if one fails, well, that's not a big deal because you have 5-10 other actors on which you can act. The EU's merger rules are aimed at preventing corporate behemoths from gaining the kind of market power that would enable them to gouge consumers and stifle smaller players across the supply chain. So that's why we have competition policy. Not even the backing of two political heavyweights like France and Germany was enough to change the Commission's mind when it blocked a deal between train makers Siemens and Alstom in 2019 on the grounds that it would harm competition in markets for railways, signal systems, and high-speed trains. That has since changed, and today's Commission says it is more open to hearing out pitches for deals that advance innovation or make the EU supply chain stronger. The new thinking will be enshrined in new merger guidelines, a non-binding instruction manual, on how to judge such deals. So there, you have countries that want to defend their industrial champions, France, Germany, so they want mergers to become bigger companies. Smaller countries tend to prefer competition rules because, yeah, they don't want their companies to be eaten alive by the big German and French companies. Historically, the Commission has been more on the side of competition law and smaller countries. Say, okay, France, Germany, you can't take over the market. Now, increasingly, there is pressure to go on the industrial side, and so more on the French and German side of things. France antitrust chief Benoît Cœuré worries about companies using the resilience umbrella to advance claims that had nothing to do with an antitrust assessment. Resilience is not an open bar, he told Politico. The Commission's competition department is yet to define how it would weigh resilience in the merger assessment and has specifically called for feedback on this point. Early signs point to a cautious approach. There are still more questions than answers, the department Deputy Director General for Mergers, Guillaume Loriot, told at an event of the OECD in Paris in February. Loriot is a key decision maker when it comes to the Commission's vetting of mergers. He is also under pressure to deliver a first draft of the revamped guidelines in April after von der Leyen's call to advance the timeline. Von der Leyen's thinking is in line with that of Berlin and Paris, which have been lobbying for looser merger rules. A group of 46 French and German corporate bosses wrote to their heads of government last October, calling for an urgent change in the merger rules to allow for European champions. Their cause was recently backed by the heads of leading Portuguese companies who said that competition policy is holding continental champions back. Again, for them, the EU is very nice. The problem is that we have threats coming from the outside, the Chinese, the Americans. And so you should not just look at competition from a European perspective, you need to look at it from a global perspective. But opposition is mounting from other EU countries, which suspect that the European champions being touted are, in reality, French and German ones in disguise. Europe's global strengths come from open and contestable internal markets, not from companies that have been allowed to concentrate national or EU market at the expense of competition, reads a joint position paper spearheaded by Finland and backed by 8 of the EU's smaller and more open economies. Competition chief Ribera has stated that she would not give a free pass to deals that harm competition and consumers. The Spanish socialist and von der Leyen's number 2 in the Commission has also narrowed the scenarios where arguments around resilience may fly. A merger that is good for resilience, for instance, would create a European contender in a global market dominated by a foreign player. In that scenario, a merger can enable a European alternative or increase a European firm's negotiating power towards non-EU suppliers, she told a recent conference in Berlin. So basically, if you have... Okay, I'll read the next one because it explains, it gives an example. So, an attempt by Airbus and Continental peers Leonardo and Thales to create a 6 billion euro satellite champion could fit that description, as Elon Musk's SpaceX extends its lead. So, on the satellite market, you have a non-European champion, SpaceX. And so, in this context, to be able to face that non-European champion that is the leader on the global market in general, well, then in that case, creating a European champion would make sense because, again, the market is dominated by a non-European. So, in that case, having a bigger European would not threaten Europe. On the contrary, it would help potentially regain market share against, in this case, an American company. The three companies have pitched a deal to create a unified, integrated, and resilient European space player with the critical mass to compete globally and grow on the export markets. They are, however, still entangled in talks with EU competition officials amid criticism from their only remaining competitor, Germany's OHB, who is like, oh shit, basically you're creating one big European company, and basically I would be stuck, OHB, I would be stuck between SpaceX and that giant European company. So we would be three on the market, and given that the two other are much bigger than me, I would automatically be crushed by the others. And so you creating that European champion is not good for the market because actually it's no longer a market, it's a duopoly. It would become a duopoly between that new European entity and SpaceX. Deals in the defense space may have better chances if they play the resilience card, according to Oliver Bretz of Euclid Law. Companies may be successful if they argue that their deal will bolster continuity of supply for critical capabilities, he said. And that's also the other side of the industrial policy, is that you're saying, yes, I want to compete against non-European threats, be it Chinese, be it American, or whatever. But also you push for this option in critical sectors. You're saying, yeah, we need a European champion in this because that is not just a regular market, it's a strategic market. It's a market that you want Europeans to be strong on, because otherwise, like you're in defense, the defense market, yeah, you kind of want European companies to be strong when it comes to equipping European defense. You don't want European defense to rely only on American companies. You want European companies, and so building European champions is important because you want to protect this critical sector that is of strategic importance, etc., etc. So industrial policy becomes also linked to geostrategic interest, because you're saying, yeah, European champion is not just a matter of economy, it's a question of strategy, geopolitics. Any questions about that or anything else? Because that was the final article that I had for you today, as I reach the end of my tea and the end of my tissues, so we have good timing. Going back to the full screen. Otherwise, if you don't have like questions, I'll tell you the program for the rest of the week, and we'll go have dinner. Up. What do I have here? No, that's fine. All right, in the meantime, I'll tell you the program of the week. Well, the program of the week is pretty simple, because the next time I see you is going to be in French on Saturday for Regesser, so it's going to be on Artist channel. We will talk about video games, so it's going to be cool. It's going to be in Avignon. We'll be at the Frames Festival, so that's going to be nice. And then next week, I haven't fully decided the agenda because since I'll be in Avignon, going back and forth to Brussels is going to be a bit affect a bit the agenda. But as far like the way I'm thinking about it for now, I'm thinking stream on Monday with a French stream, debrief of Rogesser plus political FAQ. Tuesday, news review in English, so usual time. And Friday in French, usual time for the news review in French. But that's a priori, that's what I'm going to do for next week, to be confirmed as usual on the Discord, as usual. And on this note, kids, since I don't see any questions popping up that requires an answer, well, I hope that you enjoy today's content. Like I said, today is a bit I'm speedrunning a bit this stream because I have other things to do. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed today's news review. As usual, if you like what you saw, do follow the channel. If you have a Prime lying around, do toss a coin to the streamer. Do follow me on my social. There you go, you have the links. Twitter, Discord, and everything. And yeah, on this note, I wish you all a good end of the week, and I will see you either in French on Saturday for Rogesser on the Artis channel, or next week for other adventures. And yeah, have a good end of the week, and see you next time. Bye everyone. See ya.